So, John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on and sparing some of your time.
That's all right. Nice to be here.
Yeah, no, great. Well, first of all, for our listeners and watchers, could you just give us a background of your sort of career to date? Have you always done EPCs or?
No, my work experience goes back 1,000 years to when I first started in a estate agency in 1988.
Yeah.
And I've worked in agency for 32 years before leaving in 2020 and then starting to do EPCs. And I've been doing those ever since.
Fantastic. And how does your work support the letting sector and landlords, would you say?
It's in a number of areas, I think, really, and most of it is really down to trying to get landlords to understand how energy efficiency will help or hinder the rental of their property.
Yeah.
And not everything is that straightforward that they can just, make this change and it'll influence the EPC straight away.
Yeah, sure.
So I think a lot of it is just trying to assist the landlord in trying to understand what the basics of the EPC are, how they can improve it, and some of the improvements that they do don't improve it. So it's trying to manage that sort of expectation of throwing all this money at their property.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't do anything.
No, which is quite common, I imagine. And so on our last landlord webinar, which was a couple of months now, we talked about EPCs and we talked about all the changes that have happened this year and further changes that are going to happen in the next couple of years. And we had quite a lot on our Q&A that we do at the end. Most of the questions were about EPCs. So I said to the audience, I said, well, if we got a domestic energy assessor on our podcast, would anyone be interested in listening to it? And literally everyone went, yes, please. And I think quite a lot of people asked for your contact details. So,
right, okay.
So hence why I've invited you on today. So I think this will be a really popular episode. So what I've actually done in preparation for this chat is actually sort of speak to quite a few of our landlords and said, look, I've got a domestic energy assessor coming on the podcast. He's someone that we know really, really well. What questions would you like me to ask him? So I've actually got a list of questions to almost grill you on. If that's okay, John.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So okay. So the first one that came in from one of our landlords was that there's obviously a new version of the EPC that's just been rolled out.
Yeah.
So for landlords who maybe haven't kept up with what's going on, what important changes should they be aware of?
I think in some respects they have to understand that the whole sort of EPC process has been a very fluid one ever since its sort of creation for certainly property in 2007. And it was very, very basic back in the day. And it's progressively got better. So there's always little tweaks that are happening here and there. But occasionally there's a big tweak. And some of the big tweaks are sort of quite large and do have quite an impact on the property. So windows, they've all changed. Ventilation, that's a big part and has now come into it quite a lot. Another building age, that's come in as well. Yeah. So we need to be looking a lot more closely at property. The assessments are taking longer to actually do as well because you're gathering more information. And I think landlords need to understand that if they've got the information available for us, it's going to help an awful lot and make things more accurate for them.
Yeah. So I've got some questions about that shortly, actually.
Yeah.
And I mean, just for example, for a 3-bedroom semi-detached property, I know not every property, you can say it will take a certain time, but for your average 3-bed semi, let's say, how long would you say it used to take to do the assessment on site versus how long now? Is it taking an extra half an hour or?
I think when you first started having to take into account all the new stuff, basically rolling it back, this update was supposed to happen last year.
Yeah.
So in many respects, we were sort of forewarned, this is what's going to be happening. So if you start taking this information now, when it does get rolled out, you'll know what you're doing. So initially, when you were having to sort of run round a property, you could do it in about sort of half an hour, unless it was sort of more complicated. But now it could be 10, 15 minutes just to measure windows.
Wow.
And then you're looking at all the ventilation and taking photographs of the ventilation and making sure you've allocated it to the right sort of ventilation. So what was taking 20 minutes to half an hour can take 40 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a lot of time management in property.
And then you've got obviously when when you get back to your office, so to speak, you've got all of the data entry into your CRM system, to generate the actual report, which is going to take longer naturally now as well, isn't it? And all the photographs you've got to document and keep, for auditing purposes. It's
I mean,
big job.
I will take probably between 40 and 80 photographs on a property.
Wow.
Just because we're doing quite a few in a day. If you've got your first one at 9 o'clock and on a summer's day, you could do your last one at 7, 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So you might have 1,000 photographs to download.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot to go through, and of course you might forget a few things. So having it down in picture form, certainly for evidence points of view and remembering point of view, then it's things you've got to have.
No, great. Well, one of the other questions that's come in, which sort of leads on from that, is that so obviously some of these updates arguably look small on paper, but they can cause quite unexpected rating drops or even bumps for landlords. So would you be able to explain why that matters specifically for landlords managing compliance and sort of going forward?
There's a big sort of difference, I think, between landlords who've got sort of borderline properties. So when I say borderline, certainly with the current rating being an E, as long as they're above an E39, then everything's fine.
Yeah.
But come 2030, when it becomes a C banding and 69 is the target, then 30 points have got to be found from somewhere.
Yeah.
So when you look at the update to the system, then we look at the differences that have been added in and the different age bandings that have been added in and the windows. Some of those windows that were good under the previous software are now average, and some of the average ones are now poor. So needing to know things is very important. It's key, really. So it might be a very small thing to a landlord when they say, oh yeah, I had the windows put in sometime within the last 20 years or so. It's like, yes, but was it before this period or after this period? Because you'll change your rating from a poor window to an average window to a good window.
Yeah, and just so for your average property, let's say, so when I say average, I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, 1970s 3-bed semi, let's say. If let's say 5 years ago it had an EPC done and it came up as a middle of the road D, if you did the same EPC today, would the rating generally be lower because of all the new things you've got to measure, or does that depend on all the variables? It could go up, obviously.
Both is the answer to that one. It could depend on certain things, but if you then start to look at, well, we're now looking at the extractor fans in the kitchens and the bathrooms and any other wet room. We're now looking at the sort of fireplaces and if they've got blocked vents. We're also now looking at the different types of lighting that's in the property, so the differences between LEDs, incandescents and compact fluorescents, because they're all allocated differently.
Yeah.
If we're looking at, the windows now, we're measuring every single window, whereas beforehand we just say, it's average for this property.
Yeah.
Or more than average or less than average. So the rating could be affected a little bit.
Yeah.
It could be affected a lot.
So it all depends.
Yeah, you need, if you're trying to then think, what could I do to improve the property? Don't look at your previous EPC if it was done before June of this year.
So that's really good advice, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people, when they're sort of thinking, okay, well, how am I going to get to this C grade? The first thing most landlords would do, in my opinion, would be look at their existing EPC, but really the advice is you need to get a new EPC or have a chat with someone like yourself.
Well, I mean, generally that's what we would say if somebody was to ring up, before June of this year and they say, what do I need to do to the property? So, well, firstly, look at your EPC and see what it says in the recommendation section. And of course, they go and have a look at it, and I'd have a look at it with them and say, well, these are the things that you could do. Now, I wouldn't say look at those things because they might not be relevant.
Yeah.
Because the rating may be different and therefore it might affect the type of recommendation that's recommended.
Yeah.
And it's only a recommendation, it's not something that you have to do. But when you're a landlord, it might be something you have to do.
Yeah. No, okay. So what, with regards to building age, which we mentioned before, sort of how, one of the questions that's come in is, so how, if let's say a building age is either estimated incorrectly, how much of effect does this have on the EPC?
It can have quite an effect because of the way that building regs affected how a property is constructed to comply with building regs. So if you get your age banding as being too old, it may assume things aren't there.
Yeah.
If you say that it's younger than it actually is, it may assume things are there. So it can have a negative or a positive impact on the rating.
So for things that you can't see,
Yeah.
basically, yeah, you would, because I remember, because I trained to do EPCs many years ago before it got really, really complicated. And I, if obviously, let's say you couldn't get into the roof void, to measure the insulation, then it would just automatically revert to the building regs whenever it was built. But if you've got a 1900s property and you can't see what's in the roof, and the landlord or the seller's telling you, no, there's a load of insulation up there, but you can't see or prove it, well then it just has to revert to building regs. Is that right?
Generally, yes. I mean, they've made some little tweaks here and there which have been commented upon in certain areas on the old web that we have a look at to see what people are thinking generally. And there are some occasions where the default position will be, well, there might be 100 mil in there.
Yeah.
Which there may be or there may not be. But there are agreed conventions that will say, this is what we expect to be there, so just take it as read.
Yeah.
But ideally, we want to be able to see everything so that we can measure it, photograph it, document it, so that nobody can criticise what we say in the future, because we say, well, there's the evidence.
Yeah. No. Okay.
So it is important, and the main thing is the software that we use is very aware of lots and lots of properties through all the age bands. So it knows what was there when it was first created.
Yeah.
What we then tell the software about that property is about what we see at the property.
Okay.
So needing to know is important.
So so quite a lot of properties have extensions, and I'll come on to conservatories in a minute as well. But sort of firstly, talking about extensions, what sort of complications, or what do landlords or even assessors need to be thinking about when it comes to extensions and perhaps getting evidence and paperwork ready, if people like yourself?
Yeah, again, it's age evidence. If there's no age evidence, then we can have a look at a property. We know it's generally going to be younger than the property, but it also could have been built in a very similar time period as the property. So it could have been built the same year, the year after, using the same type of brick. And so it's an extension, but it's of the same age, which is fine. But you may get extensions that were built crossing over an age banding that we need to know. So before an age banding, after an age banding, makes the rating lower, makes the rating better. So again, if landlords we built this property in this sort of time, this is when it was extended, this is the work that we've done to the property, this is the documentary evidence of it, just makes our life a lot easier. Yeah,
okay. So with conservatories, so could you sort of talk to us about the difference between conservatories perhaps with proper roofs versus perspex roof even, or
yeah, I mean, conservatories fall into two categories. It's a conservatory or it's not a conservatory.
Right.
So a conservatory has glazed areas on the wall sides and on the roof. An extension has a proper roof.
Right.
So when a conservatory has a proper roof put on it, it becomes an extension. Yeah. So its age becomes important. Its construction is important. Its roof becomes important. Now, most people will say, oh, yes, we had this warm roof put on. And I say, well, that's great. So what insulation did they put in the roof? Well, I don't know, but it's a warm roof. Well, then we can't actually access the roof. And the roof becomes the same age as the property.
Yeah.
That piece of the property.
So if the conservatory or the extension was done in 2020, but it's a 1900s property, then you have to record it based on 1900s? Is that right?
It would be the age that the conservatory is.
Okay.
So it would be how old is the base, how old are the walls, what structure the walls are. So you could have a 40-year-old conservatory with a 2025 roof on it, but it would assume everything from back then. Yeah. So again, sometimes property doesn't get assessed correctly, because the information that's therefore provided isn't enough.
No. So what about loft conversions? With regards to loft conversions, if because quite a lot of people do these without perhaps getting building regs, building regs sign off. Does that affect
Yes.
when you go and do an EPC?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have serious problems with a lot of loft conversions because somebody just went and did it. And it causes us a difficulty, especially if they've been plastered out properly and, look really, really good, but you can't get into any spaces to measure any insulation that's there. And if it hasn't been signed off by building control, then unfortunately we have to date it to the age of the property.
Wow.
Which, if it's an old property, the assumption may be no insulation in it whatsoever. But of course, the owner of the property is going, oh, well, we did this. And they'll be like, right, but you can't prove any of it.
Well, it's the whole thing. I know we've talked before, and you've said, if we can't see it, it doesn't exist.
No.
I mean, that applies to everything then, doesn't it?
Well, it
Floor
does.
insulation,
Everything.
wall insulation, everything. Yeah.
Everything. And we see a lot of that, unfortunately. And I think because a lot of people don't really appreciate EPCs and what they're all about, but they want to be forward thinking and look at how we can improve the property. So they just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Very proud of what they've done. And of course, we then go around to do the EPC, and they'll quite happily stand in front of the wall that they've insulated, the floors that they've insulated, the ceilings they've insulated. And I'll be saying, so can you prove any of this? Well, no, but we did it. But I can't see it to measure it.
No.
Well, can't you take my word for it? No,
Unfortunately not, no.
I can't. So unless you want to cut a hole in every wall and every ceiling and expose the floor so I can see it and measure it, it doesn't exist.
Which a lot of people,
Of course they do.
have to do, don't they? You have to cut a hole in the plaster.
Yeah.
So you can take a photo of it, measure it, and then they have to go and fill it
I
up.
have had owners, landlords do that, or take plug sockets off the wall, back plate, so it exposes what's behind. So you don't doubt that they've done it, but they actually want to show you that they've done it. And that's good for us, because if ever that file was called for audit, the first question will be, when I've put internal wall insulation 50 mil is, where's your picture?
Yeah.
Where's your tape measure depth? And it will be, well, I haven't got one. Well, then you have to take it out
Yeah.
and then relodge the EPC with it not there. And if that then has an effect on the EPC, taking it from being a rentable rating to an unrentable rating,
Well, it's
then that's a
no-brainer,
serious
isn't it?
problem for the landlord.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something we're seeing more common now is air source heating.
Yeah.
Is that something, can I ask what your opinion of air source is as a heating source? And
Air source heat pumps work perfectly well in the right sort of environment. And I think if you've got good insulation in your property, an install that's been done properly and solar, then the air source will work quite adequately. It'll do exactly what you want it to do, and you'll have no problems with it. The problem that we do see is that some people have had installers put them in who basically haven't done it correctly, haven't advised people on how to run it correctly, and therefore they think it doesn't work, and it's rubbish. And that's not true, because there's quite a few owners and landlords out there that have had these put in, and they're absolutely wonderful.
yeah.
But I think for a lot of people, what their expectation of it is perhaps different than the reality when it's installed in their property. And perhaps they need to ask more questions when they're thinking converting over from their existing heating system to an air source heat pump.
Yeah.
So they have to think, is it a boiler? No, it's not a boiler. It's a heat exchanger. It's a fridge in reverse. Is it going to heat my property up as quickly as my boiler does? No, it won't, because it takes time.
Yeah.
So when I turn the hot water tap on, will I get instant hot water? Well, it's not a combi boiler. It's running a hot water cylinder.
Yeah.
So you're going back in time to when hot water cylinders were all part of your hot water system.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a completely different sort of mentality behind how that air source and its associated parts will work in your property.
Okay. I think I guess going back in time, like you say, to the old cylinders with the jackets on, and I think as a whole in the UK, and I think as we look around locally in Chester and North Wales, there's quite a lot of old properties that are let out. It's certainly not dominated by new build buy-to-let properties. There's a lot of properties that are over 100 years old that have been let out locally. And I think quite commonly we'll come across properties with very, very old boilers. Do you have an issue when you can't find that boiler on the database? You know, that you have to when you go and input the data. Is it called the PC?
PCDF.
DF, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, the product code data file.
That's right.
Is a massive file, and it contains thousands of boilers, electric ones, gas ones, LPG ones. So when we go to a property and we're looking at a gas boiler, there's a gas council number that's normally somewhere on the boiler. Now it might be right in front of you, underneath, on the top, behind a plate. And once we've got that number, we can put that into the data file, and it'll tell us exactly what that boiler is, how efficient it is, and it drops into the software.
Yeah.
But we will come across a boiler that doesn't have a gas council number on it, doesn't have an identifier on it, there isn't a manual for it, or there might be a gas council number on it that we type into the software and it's not there.
Right.
So if it's not there, then we can't just assign the closest one to it because it isn't that boiler.
No.
So we have to use a generic boiler. And that generic boiler may not have efficiency attached to it that would be similar to the one that's actually in the property. So of course you could lose a couple of points by not having the correct boiler. There's also situations where we'll go to the more rural properties, so the off-gas areas, and there'll be LPG bottle or tank gas at the property, gas boiler, but it's a natural gas boiler with a conversion kit on it. So of course that boiler isn't going to be in the software running LPG gas because it's a mains gas boiler. So again, you have to use a generic LPG boiler.
Which might not be as energy efficient as
No.
the actual boiler.
That's
So
it.
so by having a really old boiler that isn't on that database, you could be, I mean, that could be the difference between a rentable rating or an unrentable rating, potentially, do you think? Or?
Well, it can be, and I think some landlords have gone out and invested in new systems, excuse me, and those boilers are brand new.
Yeah.
And they haven't been tested yet. So they get tested by the building research establishment when they're sent a boiler by the manufacturer. And there's a lot of Worcester boilers out there that have been in being since 2013, 14 that have never been tested. And there's new boilers that have been 2022 pluses, oil boilers, never been tested. So those are not in our software, so we can't use them.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of landlords have gone out trying to do the right thing, but then end up with a situation where their boiler isn't in our software, and therefore that efficiency isn't reflected. And not only can you not use the older version of the boiler, you have to use the generic version. So it doesn't get the uplift of being new. It doesn't get the benefit of its replaced item. It gets one further down. So it could lose maybe 8 points.
Wow, yeah, which is a lot.
Yeah, and certainly there's a lot of range cookers out there that have got boilers within them that are very efficient, according to the manufacturer, not tested, and 8 point loss.
Yeah, wow.
Because you're using a generic boiler. Not great.
No. Okay, so coming back to landlords, and what would you say would be the most common mistake that you see landlords making when they're trying to improve their rating without perhaps speaking to someone like yourself?
I think it's sort of doing things that they think are things that need to be done, but they don't actually improve the rating on the property.
Well, I've heard a lot of landlords say to me, "Oh, that's fine. I'll just put some LEDs up. It'll be fine." And in reality, that might make 2 points difference, maybe a little bit more.
It might make a point difference, but if they don't have 100% LED,
Yeah.
then their lighting efficiency will not be the best it can be.
No. So there'll still be that gap.
There will still be a gap, especially
Yeah.
if they've got a mix of LEDs and compact fluorescents, which is still a low energy bulb, but they're not as low energy as an LED.
No.
There's also a lot of landlords out there with electric heating in their property, and I'll say mainly electric storage heaters, which seem to be a thing that lots of landlords hate. But in efficiency terms, they're very, very good. So they rip out those storage heaters and replace them with panel heaters.
Yeah.
And the panel heaters will drop the rating because they're not as efficient as a storage heater. And lots of landlords make that mistake. And it's a massive problem, especially if they then drop into the wrong rating.
Well, so years I'm trying to think when I did my EPC course, I think it was in 2016 or 2017, and I trained with a local authority, not one round here, so I won't name them either, because I don't want to sort of get them in trouble. But I went and did the course that I did was an open course, and there was a local authority that basically put a load of their team on the course at the same time. And interestingly, something that amused me at the time is that basically they just upgraded hundreds of their council houses by putting gas fires into the living room, which obviously is a secondary heating source. And then obviously coming onto the domestic energy assessor course, realised that that's actually hindered them, because that is still correct. If you put, they literally put a load of gas fires in, so that would have dropped the rating probably fairly significantly, wouldn't it?
Well, depending on the type of fire and what sort of fireplace it's sitting in, it could be 2 points, it could be 8 points.
So they thought they were doing really good and think, we're going to, this is really energy efficient, we're going to put a gas fire in. But the reality is, because the whole thing is, if you've got an adequate heating system, you shouldn't need a secondary heating source.
No.
The central heating should be able to heat the room.
I think if a landlord is sort of pretty borderline getting to a rating that they want to be at and not having that fire in it, whether it's an electric fire or a gas fire, take it out.
Yeah.
And they could suddenly see their rating rise by a couple of points. And it takes it, certainly, if they're looking at a D68 trying to get into a C something, that get rid of the fire might actually bring that rating into the 70s, quite easily.
Yeah.
There are certain circumstances where having a secondary heater might actually improve the rating because it's the cost of the fuel that runs it.
Right, okay.
So as with any sort of heating, and it doesn't matter whether you've got a log burner and you never purchase any logs to go in it, the software will always allocate a cost of running that particular appliance.
Yeah.
So, and whether you use it or not, whether it's working or not, it still goes into the software because it could be fixed.
Yeah.
So yes, I think if landlords don't need to have fires in their properties, and certainly if they're gas and they can get rid of it, then it's not going to be on their gas safety check either.
Yeah.
So in many respects, it's probably a good thing if it doesn't need to be there, is to block the chimney off and get rid of it.
So if I'm a landlord and I ring you up now and I say, John, I've got a buy-to-let property, I need a new EPC, what would you be telling me to get myself ready for the appointment in terms of evidence perhaps I need to gather? Is there a sort of checklist that you say, right, before I arrive on Friday, I need you to do the following?
Well, I'd be asking what sort of property it is to start off with. I'd also be having a look at the existing EPC, just to get a little bit of background as to what the previous one said. I'd also be asking the landlord, why are they wanting a new EPC done? Have they done any improvements to it? And if so, what are the improvements and what evidence have they got of those improvements? And certainly if it's, we've insulated walls, we've added this, we've added that, I'd like to see documentary evidence of it, so that when I go, I can then get all of that information, so that when it goes into the software, I'm sort of armed with everything that I need. Because if it's then, what else do I need to do to improve the property? Then I can work that all out from what the assessment comes out within the recommendation section at the end.
Yeah.
And you've got a sounder sort of baseline to work from. The worst thing any assessor can do is go into a property and no information is available, and you can't see all the things that they've done, but they insist that it has been done. And again, we go back to, if it can't be evidence, then it doesn't exist.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so the more evidence you've got on things, the better. I think at the moment, so we're recording this 2 days after the autumn budget, and it's just been announced that as of 2027, landlords are going to have to pay an extra 2 percentage points worth of tax. So landlords are getting squeezed even more, it seems. So if a landlord, what am I trying to ask? If a landlord wants to make energy improvements improvements to their property, the most cost-effective way, what would your advice be? I obviously, I'm bearing in mind it depends what property, but is there sort of like a rule of thumb of where you'd go first without having to spend an absolute fortune, or is it not as simple as that?
It isn't as simple as that, because if their EPC is done before June of this year, then it's based on all the old stuff, and therefore the recommendations are based on what was then rather than what is now. So the first point is to have a new assessment done to see where it actually is now, and they might find it to be better than it was before, and therefore the recommendations will be based on what it is now. And some of the cheaper improvements can be thermostats, wall thermostats, TRVs on radiators, programmers, replacing non-LED bulbs with LED bulbs, with hot water systems that have got minimal amounts of insulation on them, so 25, 38 mil, increasing it to 80, 120 mil, but it's making sure it's the right sort of insulation and not just sticking a jacket on it, because the jacket width has to be halved. It's not the same as foam.
Yeah.
So having a new assessment done will allow the assessor to explain a little bit more fully, these are the things that you could do, rather than just running into it. Yeah.
That's the first thing you need to do. So
Yeah.
do you offer a service where you would go and do a new assessment for them and then almost work with them, as a consultant to actually, tell them what they need to do?
Yeah.
And then if perhaps they are falling short of, perhaps the rentable rating, sort of work with them, to do the improvements and then get it reassessed, or because you don't lodge. I mean, if you do that, you wouldn't lodge it the first time. Is that right? You just give them the advice and then.
Yeah, we do what's sort of basically an EPR, so it's an energy performance report as opposed to an energy performance certificate. Same thing, different terminology.
Yeah.
But it basically has everything that the EPC has, but you can then build on it to allow you to make changes to certain parts. So if you're missing some things, you can add those things in and say, well, this is what happens to the rating. So I did an EPC recently which has an oil boiler, hot water cylinder, and the rating was an F38, and it's going to be rented out. So of course they can't rent it out. So it's like, oh, right, what do we do? And I said, right, well, let's have a look at, a few things. So 2 things it was missing: a thermostat on the hot water cylinder and a wall thermostat. So put the wall thermostat into it, didn't make any change to the rating whatsoever. So all right, okay, fine. Put the hot water cylinder thermostat into it, made a difference of a point, then put the wall thermostat in, made a difference of 2 points. So
Right.
it then became an E40 and became rentable.
Perfect.
So a relatively small cost of getting those 2 items done has taken the property from being not lettable to now rentable. So that's quite an easy, simple sort
Yeah.
of fix. And they're the nice ones. It's the ones where it's all about insulation because everything's been done that's the problem. And I think when a lot of the rural properties are in that sort of low end of the ratings, the sort of E's, the bottom end of that E rating, they've got a long way to go.
Yeah.
And that's a massive problem, sort of looking at 2030. And some landlords are having to sort of plan now whether they actually keep those properties or swap them out for something better.
Yeah. So do you think? I mean, because a lot of properties, especially in North Wales, it's quite common that we'll let a property out. It'll be the old cowshed, so to speak, on someone's farm, and it's not quite as straightforward as, oh, we'll just sell it and buy another buy to let. That's a new build. Do you think? So obviously now the minimum rating is an E, and quite a few properties, if they're listed or they physically can't be improved, to a certain level without spending an absolute fortune, then there is a route to exemption, isn't there? Do you think more and more that that there'll be a lot of properties being exempt in 2030 because of this? Because it might cost, if it's going to cost 30, 40, 50,000 to get to a C rating, well then what's the point? I mean,
yeah, and I think that's where a lot of landlords were under the previous administration when the rating of C was coming in this year. And I think the market,
Which seems bonkers now, doesn't it? I mean,
it,
that would have that
yeah,
that would have never happened, would it? I don't think.
no, but it created a massive problem in the market for landlords and also tenants
Yeah,
with the restriction on the number of properties that were there and the increases in rent that happened as a sort of byproduct of that. And then we get to where we are now with 2030 and the C banding coming in, and landlords again thinking, what do I do?
yeah,
And I think it's very difficult for the rural properties, and especially with the increase in the required spend as well. I mean, when it was £3,500, it was including the VAT, it was a relatively small spend.
yeah,
Now it's considerably higher than that. A lot of those measures, which are potential recommendations, now fall under that cost.
yeah,
So I think landlords have got to think very carefully about, what they do. But again, itemising the things that they have done, being able to prove those things can sort of help the rating to sort of start off with. But again, it all starts with, and I know I sound like I'm beating the drum in many respects, but you have a new EPC done to reflect the current ratings of today and
yeah.
not what was done beforehand, because they may find the ratings have improved.
Yeah, that's a very common theme I think in this
Yeah.
conversation is which really is the advice. It starts with getting a new EPC because, like you say, the ones done pre-June this year just arguably aren't worth the paper they're written on anymore.
No, I mean they last for 10 years. So currently,
Yeah,
so that's fine. So if that EPC will take them over 2030 and it's a C69, then why would you change it?
yeah,
But if they do make any material changes to the property that could affect the rating, then what they could have done could have dropped the rating. So don't get a new EPC done. That would be what some people would say.
yeah,
But then you might think, well, the EPC is coming to an end. Now, would you get a new EPC done if we're looking at trying to find a tenant? But the EPC might actually run out before the tenant moves in.
yeah,
And then what if the rating drops and then I can't rent it out to that tenant because it's dropped from a C to a D?
yeah. That's going to be a big problem, isn't it?
It is going to be a big problem. So I know people might be thinking, oh, well, addressing these things now is 5 years early, but better to be prepared than not.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, you'd rather sort of chip away at it now. And I appreciate landlords are at a point now where they're not making big profits anymore. It's not all about cash flow. It's very much about building that capital appreciation. Longer the days of making a huge profit month by month on your rental income. With all the tax changes and
Yeah.
costs going up. And but I think if my view would be if landlords are forced out of the market by 2030 because of these changes, but perhaps for your more rural, really old properties, well, all that will do will cause a shortage of supply, which means rents will probably go up because of that, because there'll be less properties, there'll just be as many people needing to rent, and therefore the demand for properties in that area will
Yeah.
surge. And that's not going to help tenants, is it?
No, it's not. And I think a lot of landlords are, they're not just in it for the money.
No.
There's a lot of landlords that have had properties for a very long time with tenants that have been in them for a very long time.
Yeah.
And they haven't messed around with increasing the rent every year and putting it up by as much as they possibly can do every year, because they want to keep their tenants. They see the value in keeping those tenants there, but they also understand that the properties have got to be at the correct rating to be able to keep them rented out. And I think we also have to understand that there are tenants out there that don't want change within their property.
No, people don't like change, do
No,
they?
and they've been there 30 years and they're quite happy with the way that everything is. But unfortunately, they also have to understand that there are rules and the landlord has to comply with those rules. And if things need to be done, then unfortunately they've got to be done. But I think there's a slight sort of issue in just sort of going off piece slightly is, what is the difference between an EPC and condition? Now, EPCs are an extremely important part of renting your property out. If you haven't got one, you can't rent it, you can't sell it. But the condition of property is also quite an important factor as well. But I see a lot of properties which would pass MEES regulations quite easily, but you wouldn't want to live in them because their condition is really bad. And I think this is where there's a major disconnect between what is the most important thing in a property for it to be rented out. Is it the way that it looks and how habitable it is, or how energy efficient it is?
Yeah.
And I think there's a massive difference, and the things do not go hand in hand. And I think it gets lost quite a lot with that.
Yeah, so there almost needs to be a condition report, perhaps. You know, you're saying, you know, because there is obviously when a property is tenanted, if there is something, you know, like a hazard, let's say, then obviously the local authority can get involved, and you know, all properties have to be habitable, don't they?
Oh yeah.
Up to a certain standard. And you know, if you've got a good letting agent, or if you're a self-managed landlord, obviously, you know, you'll be doing your checks prior to letting. But a lot of, you know, perhaps self-managed landlords or letting agents perhaps overlook this, and it's very much, you know, as long as it measures up on paper and the EPC rating is an E or a C, and in a few years' time, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
So maybe the concentration needs to be on condition rather the energy efficiency, maybe.
Possibly. I mean, in many respects, I see a lot of properties which are perhaps not the best, you know, inside, but the tenant's quite happy with the way things are. You know, the landlord would do improvements if they could actually get in to do them.
Yeah.
And I think it makes things, you know, quite difficult for a landlord who's trying to be objective about things, improve the properties periodically, because the experience of the tenant is important to them in many respects. They don't want tenants leaving every 5 minutes because it's costing them to re-let their property. So
No.
keeping the tenant happy, keeping the property up to standard, you know, is important. But, you know, the EPC is not about condition. It's only about those things in the properties for which efficiency is labelled against them. But,
Yeah.
you know, what the landlord does, the tenant might not actually use anyway. And I think that's
Yeah.
you know, as long as the landlord does what they're supposed to do, then that's absolutely fine. But it's a problem for us when I think landlords are trying to find out what the best measures are, but they can't actually get around to do them.
No. Are there any questions that I haven't asked you, perhaps that I should have asked you? Is anything, you know, perhaps you want to add further on this? You know, any other final sort of remarks?
I think mainly from my point of view, it's just getting landlords to understand that they don't just go out and do things to their property and then get an assessor out and say, oh, I've done all of these wonderful things, my house is now wonderful, and we'll just stand there and go, okay.
Where?
Where?
I
How?
can't see it.
How much? Prove it to me. Oh,
Yeah.
well, I just went and did it because...
Prove it.
and I bought all this insulation from B&Q and stuck it on the wall. Listen, it's like, it means nothing to me. That could be dry lined.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think evidencing everything that they've done and keeping that information, it doesn't matter if it was done 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that information goes into the software for that particular age part of the property.
Yeah.
And so, because an EPC is, I think I'll just sort of go a little bit more about sort of how the EPC is sort of built. The software knows property. It knows property from pre-1900 right up to today. So everything is set there in a stock standard. What we do is tell it, this is what the property has now. So to influence that EPC, we have to have the information to tell it what it has now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the software assumes as built, as built, as built. If you don't know the window age, well, it's unknown. If you know the windows of 2005, great, it's in that period. So this is how efficient that window bit is. Oh, you don't know what sort of boiler it is. Well, it's a generic boiler. Oh, you can't get into the loft. We'll make an assumption of that.
Yeah.
So again, it's imperative that landlords understand that we will tell the software what we see. We can't just take their word for it. And little things that they might forget about or miss out on, because we can't see it at the time, once that EPC is lodged, that's sort of it, unless
Yeah.
it's relodged again with an improvement on it.
Yeah, it's a public record, isn't it?
It is a public record, and it sits on there for 10 years. Even if it expires, it sits there.
Yeah.
When a new EPC is created for that property, that old EPC sits at the bottom as a link, so you can go back to it.
So you can still reference the
You
old
can still
report.
reference the old EPC, yes. And there's lots of people that would see, their EPC saying things completely different to what their new EPC says. And I think there's a lot of property out there that have been slightly misrepresented.
Well, something I was going to ask is we don't hear as much anymore, but we do get the old landlord who will tell us at our agency, I can get an EPC, done for 30 quid. What would you say to that? I mean, are the assessors that are doing it for 30 quid, 40 quid, 50 quid, whatever, what are they not doing, in your opinion? Perhaps, it's all speculative, obviously, the answer to this question. But if someone's charging peanuts for an EPC, are they going into the loft? Are they even going to the property?
Possibly not. I mean, but at the end of the day, I think there's quite a few assessors out there that, even though they know that they'll be audited periodically, I've just had an audit on one that I did about 4 weeks ago, and I might be audited 4 or 5 times a year. But if you fail an audit because of something that you haven't recorded correctly, you'll get audited more. So I think a lot of people that do sort of get assessments done for relatively small amounts of money, those assessments might be perfectly good. That assessor might be quite happy doing £30, £40 assessments, but they'll have to do 10 of them a day. And you can't do 10 proper assessments.
No.
And take all the information that is required and then spend all the time putting that information into the software to generate the EPC. And by the time you've paid to have the lodgement done, what are you actually making out of that assessment?
Well, how much does it cost to lodge an EPC now?
It's about £8 to lodge.
Yeah.
An
So
EPC.
if you're charging 30 quid, that's £22.
But your travel, your time.
You've got to burn diesel, so to speak, haven't you? And it's your time, it's your equipment, your insurance. And those assessors that are charging, the lower end, they're not going to be the assessors holding your hand and actually, like you say, doing a report first and then sort of going back or reassessing the property once you've made those improvements. Unlikely.
Potentially not, and I think. And I've heard it from quite a few landlords recently that have had other assessors to do work for them, and perhaps they haven't been able to do an assessment on the current property, and I've been fortunate enough to have been asked out to go and have a look at it. And they've then said, we wish you'd come out to it beforehand or come out to our other property beforehand, because we've had far more information out of you than we had out of the other assessor. And when we've asked questions about the assessment, that we've not been sort of deflected onto other things. You've actually answered a question, or taken time to look at the assessment and come up with some answers that we could work with, and maybe do things that we hadn't really thought of. So I think it is a process. There's lots and lots of assessors out there. There's lots of very, very good ones, and there's quite a few not so good ones. But I think at the end of the day, a landlord in some cases is only interested in making sure it complies.
Agreed.
And I think a lot of the issues can arise around not actually putting the information about that property in correctly, just to slightly skew the result. And I think sometimes it can be about the age banding's wrong, floor structure is incorrect. I mean, I've seen properties which have been sandstone that have been listed in the EPC as cavity.
Wow.
And it's like, it's a pre-1900 sandstone solid wall property of 450 mil. How can that be a cavity? But because it's not being audited, it doesn't get picked up.
Then they can get away with it, can't they? But then if you're buying that property, if it's on the sales market and you're buying that property, and yes, obviously, buyers will get their own survey. But if you're not getting a survey and just going off the EPC, and you're not looking with your eyes, so to speak, or you're not fluent in property construction, you might look on the EPC, and that's misrepresenting the property, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I think if people become more aware about EPCs and what they mean, and generally I would say that the vast majority of people have no understanding of what an EPC is anyway.
No, it's almost not taken seriously enough,
No.
I don't think.
But it is taken seriously by some lenders that will lend better rates on the more
Energy
greener
efficient, yeah.
properties, so A, Bs and Cs. So I think as time rolls on, and certainly as landlords get into the lender wants to have it as a minimum C, they are going to start to look at the property that they might be buying as a buy-to-let.
Yeah.
And they might be thinking, well, this EPC doesn't look like the property I'm buying, and it may be that they insist on having a new EPC created for that property so that it actually does give a today rating, not
Yeah.
a 5 year ago rating.
But I mean, surely we'll see in the not so distant future, if they haven't got plans to do this already, when you go on Rightmove and you're looking for a property to either buy or rent, surely we'll see properties, we'll be able to view properties in order of energy efficiency. You can do it. You can filter bedrooms, you can filter price, etc. Surely that's something that will be on the cards soon.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting, I would think.
Well, I think if it gets to the point of insisting that an EPC is provided prior to listing a property, and it has to be there so that when it's listed, that rating is there from day one.
Whereas it just has to be commissioned in
Yeah.
the pipeline,
Yeah.
whatever. And it's such a grey area. Well, it's not a grey area, but there's no policing. There's a lot of estate agents who will list a property and they'll say, EPC awaiting rating, and it's been on the market 4 months. Because no one's policing that. I don't think, are they?
Trading standards should be
Yeah, but
looking at it, but
yeah.
I think the agent has gone through it with their client numerous occasions, numerous times, but perhaps not reinforced the need to have it done, and perhaps
because they want it on the market,
well, they want it on the market, but if it doesn't sell, then they'll take it off the market, and I'm not going to spend the money on an EPC if I'm not going to sell it.
Yeah.
But then it does get an offer on it, and then it's suddenly they go through the sales process, and the solicitor turns around and says, "Oh, where's the EPC?" And I haven't got one.
Oops, forgot about that. Yeah.
Oh, you won't be exchanging contracts on Friday then, and bearing in mind it's Wednesday.
Well, and this is why, and we hadn't planned to talk about this, but I think it is relevant. With the announcement a few weeks ago about estate agency reform and reforming the whole sales process, and perhaps going back to something that looks like a HIP, maybe. That actual sellers in the next few years might have to get a condition report or a pre-sale pack done, and obviously, EPCs were part of HIPs, weren't they, many years ago?
Yeah, they were. I think when the HIP was introduced, and you had to have a home information pack to be able to market your property, and the price of it in some respects as an upfront cost was prohibitive to a lot of people, £400 or £500 or so,
Yeah.
on the basis that they may or may not sell their property, and introduced in a period where the financial issues at the time made
Yeah.
it very, very difficult for people buying and selling to actually move things forward. And it failed, in inverted commas, because the market wasn't strong enough at the time to make it worthwhile and make it look like it made a difference. And I think if people looked at the areas where it was trialled, it took out about a month from the whole sales sort of transaction process. Now, I think a lot of people, the whole process takes far too long.
Yeah.
If you're looking at 3 months to sell a property and buy a property, why does it take so long? It always has done. So it seems to be, well, it always will do. But why? So if they do reintroduce it and it's a more stable market and everybody is moving in the same sort of direction, then it can work. And yes, the EPC is there. The condition report, maybe. But I think we have a problem with, and I don't see why the problem beforehand was not having a survey, yes, commissioned by the vendor, that goes into the pack. But in many respects, a survey done by the buyer is commissioned by the buyer.
Yeah.
It's still done by an RICS surveyor.
Yeah.
They've still got their own rules and regulations, so why would it be biased? in one way or another. But yes, it might have a time limit on it, but as do all the searches and everything else that goes into the pack. So
Yeah, no,
I think everybody has to take a view on it.
Yeah, and I mean, my personal thoughts would be on a pre-survey, on the vendor getting a survey done prior to marketing would actually probably reduce the amount of fall throughs because it's very much, this is the property, it's priced at, let's say, 300,000. This is the condition, this is the valuation that's been done by the chartered surveyor. Therefore, there isn't any hidden surprises.
I mean, I think as a condition report, a condition report I think would be fine. Valuation, leave that out to have it valued separately by the buyer's side. But condition is always important, and I think it would save the agent a lot of aggravation when the sale falls through and the next party comes along and says, "Has a survey been done on the property?"
Yeah, because if we know something that is a reason why it's fallen through, we do have to disclose it.
Yeah, so you can just
Consumer
go,
protection.
There's the survey.
Yeah. So it's a more transparent process, I think. So I'm quite excited to see. I'm a big believer in that. Not just the condition reports, but in reforming the process. Because as we stand now, I mean, if you take into account how many days it takes to agree a sale, and then for it to go through, it's now over 200 days, which is just bonkers. It's absolutely crazy.
It's never changed. In 1988, when I started doing estate agency, to 2020 when I left it, no change.
No.
And the only time there was ever really an improvement in sales, and we saw it all in the press, house sales done in 48 hours, 24 hours.
Yeah.
We know full well that most of the checks were never done. There was cash probably involved. It didn't go through money laundering. It didn't go through any of that sort of regulation that we have now. But I think everybody who's in the selling and buying sort of process just wants to see things move smoothly and quickly.
I agree.
And I don't see why, when technology is so to the fore now, that things are still taking as long.
We've got more technology, more automation, more AI, than we've ever had before, and yet it's just taking longer and longer and longer to sell a house. Really interesting.
I know, but
well, John, there'll be quite a lot of landlords that are either watching or listening to this that would probably like your details, if that's okay. If they'd like to discuss anything further with you, perhaps they're reletting a rental property and need a new EPC, or they are thinking about 2030 and they're thinking, right, how do I get my EPC rating up, to a rentable rating? Would you be happy if I put your contact details in the show notes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if landlords are, worried, concerned, don't be.
No.
Get the assessment done first.
Yeah.
Sit down, look at it logically, work things out, and then take it from there. They might find themselves in a better position than what they thought they would be.
Yeah.
But, I think in some respects also, we're 5 years away from 2030. There will be additional upgrades to the software that we use, because it is all about energy efficiency. So I think it's just keeping that in mind as well, and certainly not rushing into things necessarily.
No, but you need to plan ahead.
It is about planning.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Right. Well, John, thank you very much for your time
That's
tonight.
all right.
Thank you very much.
Me. All right.
Cheers.
Thank you.